Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, Taro. How are you? First chatter of the day. My blanket's stuck under my chair. Hold on. Hi, random citizen. Welcome to the stream. I am sick and I haven't spoken that much today, so I'm not sure how it's gonna go, but we're gonna try to read a bit. I have some water. I'm almost out of ice. I just made more, but my water won't be cold for long. I'm doing okay. How about you? I'm doing all right. I've kind of had a hard day. Oh, thank you. As you guys know, I recently started a new job. I'm working at Target. And I'm not sure how I really feel about it because I got a job in like the beauty section in the Ulta. And I thought that would kind of be what I'm used to, where I work with customers like one-on-one and I have like a team that I work with. But it's just a very different environment. Like I think I was told like 200 people that work at that one Target. And everyone kind of just does their own thing. It seems like almost all the work I've done has just been stocking and restocking and backstocking, and I don't know. I don't love it. And I feel like a baby when I say it, but working is like really hard for me. And I feel so annoying and privileged when I say that, but genuinely, starting a new job is very distressing to me. I usually, in social situations, when I meet people, especially people with authority over me, I kind of just assume that they hate me until they say something nice to me, and then I'm like, oh, we're besties now. But then as soon as something happens that puts me back in my place as like the inferior, I feel resentful. Like I just feel, I don't know how to describe it. All the jobs suck. Exactly. That's completely understandable. Yeah, it's just been hard. Like things are, I mean, it is corporate. Things are kind of organized, but neither of my bosses were even there for like my first week. I never had a chance to let them know what days I'm unavailable. Let me turn the music down. I never got a chance to let them know when I wasn't available, and so I've been trying to call the store for like the past 3 days to request a day off when the schedule has already come out. And I called off of work today because I was sick all day yesterday. I had a fever, and when I went to bed last night, I still had a fever, and I had called earlier in the day and asked like, yo, if I'm sick, how do I call off? And the guy on the phone, oh, sorry, my menu came up. But the employee on the phone told me that I just have to call in sick in the app. So that's what I did. But now I finally got to talk to my boss today, and she wouldn't answer me about my request off. And she sounds mad at me for calling in sick. And I don't know. It's just hard. Like, I don't really feel okay at a job or in day-to-day life if I don't at least enjoy what I'm doing a little. Like, if I feel like I'm wasting my time, I'm just miserable. And the thought of spending so much of my adult life working just makes me sad. But anyway, enough about my own life. We're gonna get into this fictional world now. But yeah, I'm really scared to go to work tomorrow because I feel like my boss, who I hasn't even met, is already mad at me. And I just don't want to start off on the wrong foot. That's the expression, right? Start off on the wrong foot. Yeah. Okay, let me fix this book real quick because it's annoying me how wiggly it is. Hold up. Hold up, governor. Bum, bum, bum. But how have your lives been going? I feel like I haven't heard updates from a lot of you lately. I'm gonna turn the smoothing up. Okay, how does this look? There we go, now the book is a little better. Hopefully they'll be nice. I hope so. Alright, let's start reading, shall we? We are on, let's see. We are on chapter 16. And today we are, gosh, the music just keeps getting louder, doesn't it? Oh, thank you for liking my stream. I love how I can see that. That's so cute. That's adorable. Oh no, I just hid the chat. One sec. Hi, Manager-kun. Okay, we're gonna start reading. The page we're beginning on today is page 108. I apologize for the moth, sick voice, and coughing throughout the stream in advance. We're on page 108 out of 333, I think it was. Okay, let me hydrate real quick, and I'm gonna take my meds, so if you haven't taken your meds today, please do it with me. All right, let's go. A transcript of an interview conducted by Francois Diallo, librarian of the town of New Petoskey, publisher and editor of the New Petoskey News, 26 years after the Miranda... Wait, hold on. I need to be able to hear myself a little. Here we go. 26 years after Miranda and Arthur's last dinner party in Los Angeles, and 15 years after the Georgia flu. Francois, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today. Kirsten, my pleasure. What are you writing? Diallo, it's my own private shorthand. I made it up. Kirsten, is it faster? Diallo, very much so. I can transcribe an interview in real time and then write it out later. Now, I appreciate you talking to me this afternoon. As I mentioned yesterday, I've just started a newspaper. And I've been interviewing everyone who comes through New Petoskey. Kirsten, I'm not sure I have much news to tell you. Diallo, if you were to talk about the other towns you've passed through, that would count as news to us. The world's become so local, hasn't it? We hear stories from traders, of course, but most people don't leave their towns anymore. I think my readers will be interested in hearing from people who've been to other places since the collapse. I'm sorry if the music is too loud. I think it's okay though. And more than that, well, publishing the newspaper has been an invigorating project. But then I thought, why stop with the newspaper? Why not create an oral history of this time we live in, and an oral history of the collapse? With your permission, I'll publish excerpts from this interview in the next edition, and I'll keep the entirety of this interview for my archives. Kirsten, that's fine. It's an interesting project. I know you're supposed to be interviewing me, but could I ask you a question first? The music's okay? Okay. Thank you, Enderboy. I am feeling better today than I was yesterday. Thank you. Okay, so Kirsten is asking Francois, the interviewer. Oh, if you guys forgot, Kirsten is the girl. Why is my menu open again? I'm sorry, y'all. Kirsten was a little girl when the pandemic happened, and I'm getting distracted. Kirsten was 6 when it happened, and she witnessed the death of Arthur, and now she's an adult in the traveling orchestra. So this was maybe a decade previous. She's being interviewed. So she asks him, "You've been a librarian for a long time." And he said, "Since year 4. And she says, "Those comics I showed you just now, with the space station, have you ever seen them before, or others in the series?" Diallo, "Never, no. They're not part of any comic book series I've ever come across. You said someone gave them to you as a gift?" Kirsten says, "Arthur Leander gave them to me. That actor I told you about." Alright, that was all of chapter 16. It looks like chapter 17 goes back in time again. So let's see. A year before the Georgia flu, Arthur and Clark met for dinner in London. Arthur was passing through town en route to Paris, at a moment when Clark happened to be visiting his parents, and they agreed to meet for dinner in a corner of the city that Clark didn't know especially well. He'd set out early, but when he stepped out of the tube station, he had a vision of his phone lying where he'd left it on his parents' kitchen counter, a map application open on the screen. Clark liked to think that he knew London, but the truth was he'd spent most of his adult life in New York, secure within the confines of Manhattan's idiot-proof grid, and on this particular evening London's tangle of streets was inscrutable. The side street for which he was searching failed to materialize, and he found himself wandering, increasingly late, angry and embarrassed, retracing his footsteps and trying different turns. He hailed a cab when the rain began. "Easiest 2 quid I ever made in my life," the cabbie said, when Clark told him the address. The cabbie performed 2 left turns in rapid succession, and they were at the restaurant, on a side street that Clark could have sworn hadn't been there when he'd passed by 10 minutes ago. "Of course," the cabbie said, "you don't know where you're going unless you know where you're going." And when Clark went in, Arthur was waiting, caught under a beam of track lighting, in a booth at the back. There'd been a time when Arthur would have never faced the dining room of a restaurant. long periods when the only way to eat a meal in peace was to sit with his back to the room and hope no one would recognize his hunched shoulders and expensive haircut from behind. But now Clark realized Arthur wanted to be seen. "Dr. Thompson," Arthur said. "Mr. Leander." The disorientation of meeting one's sagging contemporaries, memories of a younger face crashing into the reality of jowls, under-eye pouches, unexpected lines, and then the terrible realization that one probably looks just as old as they do. "Do you remember when we were young and gorgeous?" Clark wanted to ask. "Do you remember when everything seemed limitless? Do you remember when it seemed impossible that you'd get famous and I'd get a PhD?" But instead of saying any of this, he wished his friend a happy birthday. "You remembered?" "Of course," Clark said. "That's one thing I like about birthdays. They stay in one place. Same spot on the calendar, year in, year out. But the years keep going faster, have you noticed?" They settled into the business of ordering drinks and appetizers, and all Clark could think of as they talked was whether or not Arthur had noticed that a couple at a nearby table was looking at him and whispering. If Arthur had noticed, he seemed supremely unconcerned, but the attention put Clark on edge. "You're going to Paris tomorrow?" Clark asked somewhere between the first martini and the appetizers. "Visiting my son. Elizabeth's vacationing there with him this week. It's just been a bitch of a year, Clark." "I know," Clark said. "I'm sorry." Arthur's third wife had recently served him with divorce papers, and her predecessor had taken their son to Jerusalem. "Why Israel?" Arthur said miserably. "That's the part I don't understand, of all places." "Wasn't she a history major in college? Maybe that's what she likes about it, all the history in the place." "I think I'll have the duck," Arthur said, and this was the last they spoke of Elizabeth. Actually, the last they spoke of anything of substance. "I've been indecently lucky," Arthur said later that night on his fourth martini. It was a line he'd been using a great deal lately. Clark wouldn't have been bothered by it if he hadn't read Arthur use it in Entertainment Weekly a month or two earlier. The restaurant was one of those large, underlit places that seemed to recede into a shadow at the periphery, and in the murky middle distance, Clark saw a pinpoint of green light that meant someone was recording Arthur on a cell phone. Clark felt increasingly stiff. He was aware of the whispers that had sprung up, the glances from other tables. Arthur was talking about an endorsement deal of some kind, men's watches, his gestures loose. He was telling an animated story about his meeting with the watch executives, some kind of humorous misunderstanding in the boardroom. He was performing. Clark had thought he was meeting his oldest friend for dinner, but Arthur wasn't having dinner with a friend, Clark realized, so much as having dinner with an audience. He felt sick with disgust. When he left a short time later, he found himself wandering, even though by now he'd oriented himself and knew how to get back to the tube station. Cold rain, the sidewalk shining, the shh of car tires on the wet street. Thinking about the terrible gulf of the years between 18 and 50. Hello, Eric. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. I'm still sick, but I'm glad that my voice is still soothing. We're on chapter 18 now. I just gotta hydrate real quick. Okay, here's more of the interview. Have we met this guy yet that's interviewing Francois? I don't know. I don't think we did. I don't remember. There's too many characters in this book. Francois Diallo. I'll ask you more about Arthur Leander and the comics in a moment. Perhaps I could ask you a few questions about your life first. Kirsten. You know me, Francois. We've been coming through this town for years. Diallo. Yes, of course, but some of our readers might not know you, or the symphony. I've been giving copies of this paper to traders, asking them to distribute it along their routes. You've been acting since you were very young, isn't that right? I don't remember him. I don't either. It sounds like maybe he just stays in a town they travel to. Kirsten. Very young. I was in a commercial when I was 3. Do you remember commercials? I do, regrettably. What were you selling? I don't actually remember the thing itself, the commercial, but I remember my brother telling me it was for arrowroot biscuits. Diallo. I remember those too. What came after the biscuits? I actually don't remember, but my brother told me a little. He said I did more commercials, and when I was 6 or 7, I had a recurring role on a televised show. Do you remember which show? I wish I did. I can't remember anything about it. I think I've mentioned before I have some problems with memory. I can't remember very much from before the collapse. Diallo. It's not uncommon among people who were children when it happened. And the symphony? You've been with them for a while, haven't you? Since I was 14. Where did they find you? Kirsten. Ohio. The town where we ended up after we left Toronto, my brother and I. And then after he died, I was there by myself. Diallo. I didn't know they went that far south. Kirsten. They only went down there once. It was a failed experiment. They wanted to expand the territory, so that spring they followed the Maumee River down past the ruins of Toledo, and then the Auglaize River into Ohio, and they eventually walked into the town where I lived. Diallo. Why do you always say it was a failed experiment? Kirsten. I'll always be grateful that they passed through my town, but the expedition was a disaster for them. By the time they reached Ohio, they lost an actor to some illness on the road, something that looked like malaria, and they got shot 3 times in various places. One of the flautists got hit and almost died of a gunshot wound. The symphony never left their usual territory again. Diallo. It sounds like a very dangerous life. Kirsten. No, that was years ago. It's much less dangerous than it used to be. Diallo. The other towns you passed through, are they very different from here? Kirsten. The places we returned to more than once aren't dissimilar to here. Some places you pass through once and never return because you can tell something's very wrong. Everyone's afraid, or it seems like some people have enough to eat and other people are starving, or you see pregnant 11-year-olds and you know the place is either lawless or in the grip of something, a cult of some kind. There are towns that are perfectly reasonable, logical systems of governance and such, and then you pass through 2 years later and they've slid into disarray. All towns have their own traditions. There are towns like this one where you're interested in the past and you've got a library. Diallo. The more we know about the former world, the better we'll understand what happened when it fell. Kirsten. But everyone knows what happened. The new strain of the swine flu, and then the flights out of Moscow, those planes full of patient zeros. Diallo. Nonetheless, I believe in understanding history. Kirsten. Fair enough. Some towns, as I was saying, some towns are like this one, where they want to talk about what happened, about the past. Other towns, discussion of the past is discouraged. We went to a place once where the children didn't know the world had ever been different, although you'd think all the rusted-out automobiles and telephone wires would give them a clue. Some towns are easier to visit than others. Some places have elected mayors, or they're run by elected committees. Sometimes a cult takes over, and those towns are the most dangerous. In what sense? In the sense that they're unpredictable. You can't argue with them because they live by an entirely different logic. You come to a town where everyone's dressed in all white, for example. I'm thinking of a town we visited once just outside of our usual territory, north of Kincardine, and then they tell you that they were saved from the Georgia flu and survived the collapse because they're superior people and free from sin. And what can you say to that? It isn't logical. You can't argue with it. You just remember your own lost family and either want to cry or harbor murderous thoughts. Hello, welcome, Big Wee Joe and Hill E. It's good to see you guys. Oh, we're on part 4 of the book now. Part 4 is called The Starship. Chapter 19. I'm glad we're out of that interview portion. It's really hard to read out loud. Sometimes the traveling symphony thought that what they were doing was noble. There were moments around campfires when someone would say something invigorating about the importance of art, and everyone would find it easier to sleep that night. At other times it seemed a difficult and dangerous way to survive, and hardly worth it, especially at times when they had Excuse me. At other times it seemed a difficult and dangerous way to survive, and hardly worth it, especially at times when they had to camp between towns, when they were turned away at gunpoint from hostile places, when they were traveling in snow or rain through dangerous territory, actors and musicians carrying guns and crossbows, the horses exhaling great clouds of steam, times when they were cold and afraid and their feet were wet. Or times like now when the heat was unrelenting, July pressing down upon them and the blank walls of the forest on either side, walking by the hour and wondering if an unhinged prophet or his men might be chasing them, arguing to distract themselves from their terrible fear. All I'm saying, Deirdre said, 12 hours out of St. Deborah by the water. Oh, he said this 12 hours out of this town. Is that quote on the lead caravan would be way more profound if it hadn't been lifted from Star Trek. He was walking near Kirsten in August. Survival is insufficient. Kirsten had had these words tattooed on her left forearm at the age of 15 and had been arguing with Deirdre about it for almost ever since. Deirdre harbored strong anti-tattoo sentiments. He said he'd seen a man die of an infected tattoo once. Kirsten also had 2 black knives tattooed on the back of her right wrist, but these were less troubling to Deirdre, being much smaller and inked to mark specific events. Yes, Kirsten said, I'm aware of your opinion on the subject, but it remains my favorite line of text in the world. She considered Deirdre one of her dearest friends. The tattoo argument had lost all of its sting over the years and had become something like a familiar room where they met. Oh, I hope you get better. I wish I could help. Depending on what it is, maybe ginger clover or star anise tea with honey. I've never seen an allergist. I do need to go see if there's anything I'm allergic to. But I've been resting and trying to drink lots of water. I don't have tea right now, but I should go get some. I just don't have any money. I haven't gotten paid from my new job yet, and I'm just making do with what I have. Okay. Mid-morning, the sun not yet broken over the tops of the trees. The symphony had walked through most of the night. Kirsten's feet hurt and she was delirious with exhaustion. It was strange, she kept thinking, that the prophet's dog had the same name as the dog in her comic books. Yes, I knew it! I knew it! I knew it! She'd never heard the name Luli before or since. See, that illustrates the whole problem, Dieter said. The best Shakespearean actress in the territory, and her favorite line of text is from Star Trek. The whole problem with what? Kirsten felt that she might actually be dreaming at this point, and she longed desperately for a cool bath. It's gotta be one of the best lines ever written for a TV show, August said. Did you see that episode? I can't say I recall, Dieter said. I was never really a fan. Kirsten? Kirsten shrugged. She wasn't sure if she actually remembered anything at all of Star Trek, or if it was just that August had told her about it so many times that she'd started to picture his stories in her head. Don't tell me you've never seen Star Trek Voyager, August said, hopefully. That episode with those lost Borg in 7 of 9? Remind me, Kirsten said, and he brightened visibly. While he talked, she allowed herself to imagine that she remembered it. A television in a living room, a ship moving through the night's silence of space, her brother watching beside her, their parents, if she could only remember their faces, somewhere near. The symphony stopped to rest in the early afternoon. Would the prophets send men after them, or had they been allowed to leave? The conductor sent scouts back down the road. Kirsten climbed into the driver's bench of the third caravan. A dull buzz of insects from the forest, tired horses grazing on the side of the road. The wildflowers growing by the roadside were abstract from this vantage point. Paint dots of pink and purple and blue in the grass. Ginger cloves and star anise should be not too expensive. That's true, but I have maybe like $5 in my account. Yeah. Kirsten closed her eyes, a memory from early childhood before the collapse. Sitting with a friend on a lawn, a game where they closed their eyes and concentrated hard and tried to read one another's minds. She had never entirely let go of the notion that if she reached far enough with her thoughts, she might find someone waiting, that if two people were to cast their thoughts outward at the same moment, they might somehow meet in the middle. Charlie, where are you? She knew the effort was foolish. She opened her eyes. The road behind them was still empty. Olivia was picking flowers below. A little farther, the conductor was saying, somewhere below, and the horses were being harnessed again, the caravan creaking into motion, the exhausted symphony walking onward through the heat, until hours later they set up camp by the roadside. The ones who remembered the lost world thinking longingly of air conditioning even after all these years. It just came out of a vent, Alexandra said. I believe so, Kirsten said. I'm too tired to think. They walked for all but 5 of the 18 hours since they'd left St. Deborah by the water, through the night and morning and deep into the afternoon, trying to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the prophet. Some of them took turns trying to sleep in the morning in the moving caravans, others walking and walking until their thoughts burned out one by one like dying stars, and they fell into a fugue state wherein all that mattered or had ever mattered were these trees, this road, the counterpoint rhythms of human footsteps and horses' hooves, moonlight turning to darkness, and then the summer morning, caravans rippling like apparitions in the heat, and now the symphony was scattered here and there by the roadside in a state of semi-collapse while they waited for dinner to be ready. Half the symphony had set off in pairs to hunt rabbits. The cook fire sent a plume of white smoke like a marker into the sky. Air conditioning came out of a vent, August confirmed. You'd press a button and whoosh, cold air. I had one in my bedroom. Kirsten and August were setting up tents, and Alexandra, whose tent had been set up already, was lying on her back staring up at the sky. Too bad you ain't monetization. I literally have like 10 hours left. If everyone watches this stream for an hour, I will literally hit monetization. It could happen today. I also posted a new video today if you want to see that as well. From the Valorant stream. My throat will not clear. Oh my god, thank you for the 420. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. You didn't have to do that. Very, very close. We'll hit it this week, probably. Okay. Oh, Alexandra said, so was it electricity or gas? August looked at the tuba, who was sitting nearby with his daughter half asleep in his arms. Olivia had announced that she was too tired to wait for dinner, so he'd been telling her a bedtime story about a mermaid while Lynn set up their tent. Electricity, the tuba said. Air conditioners were electric. He craned up his neck to see his daughter's face. Is she asleep? I think so, Kirsten said. This was when she heard the exclamation from the third caravan. What the fuck, someone said. God damn it, what is this? And she stood up in time to see the first cello haul a girl out of the caravan by the arm. Olivia sat up, blinking. Ooh, we might have some action finally. A stowaway. August was grinning. He'd been a stowaway himself once. We haven't had a stowaway in years. The stowaway was the girl who'd followed Kirsten and St. Deborah by the water. She was crying and sweaty, her skirt soaked with urine. The first cello lifted her to the ground. She was under the costumes, the first cello said. I went in looking for my tent. Get her some water, Gil said. The conductor swore under her breath and looked off down the road behind them a while the symphony gathered. The first flute gave the girl one of their water bottles. I'm sorry, the girl said. I'm so sorry. Please don't make me go back. We can't take children, the conductor said. This isn't like running away and joining the circus. The girl looked confused. She didn't know what a circus was. Incidentally, the conductor said to the assembled company, this is why we check the caravans before we depart. We left St. Deborah in kind of a hurry, someone muttered. I had to leave, the girl said. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'll do anything, just... Why did you have to leave? I'm promised to the prophet, the girl said. You're what? The girl was crying now. I didn't have any choice, she said. I was going to be his next wife. Jesus, Deirdre said. This goddamn world. Olivia was standing by her father, rubbing her eyes. The tuba lifted her into his arms. He has more than one? Asked Alexandra, still blissfully ignorant. He has 4, the girl said, sniffling. They live in the gas station. The conductor gave the girl a clean handkerchief from their pocket. What's your name? Eleanor. How old are you, Eleanor? 12. Ew. Why would he marry a 12-year-old? He had a dream where God told him he was to repopulate the earth. Of course he did, the clarinet said. Don't they all have dreams like that? Right. I always thought that was a prerequisite for being a prophet, Saeed said. Hell, if I were a prophet. Your parents allowed this? The conductor said, simultaneously making a shut-up motion in the direction of the clarinet and Saeed. They're dead. I'm sorry to hear that. Were you spying on me and St. Deborah? Kirsten asked. The girl shook her head. No one told you to watch us? No, she said. Did you know Charlie and the 6th guitar? Eleanor frowned. Charlie and Jeremy? Yes, do you know where they went? They went to the Museum of Civilization. Eleanor said museum very carefully, the way people sound out foreign words of whose pronunciation they're uncertain. The what? August whistled softly. They told you that's where they were going? Charlie said if I could ever get away, that's where I could find them. I thought the Museum of Civilization was a rumor, August said. What is it? Kirsten had never heard of it. I heard it was a museum someone set up in an airport. Jill was unrolling his map, blinking short-sightedly. I remember a trader telling me about it years back. We're headed there anyway, aren't we? It's supposed to be outside the Sovereign City. The conductor was peering over his shoulder. Wait, I'm really confused because for the conductor, they keep swapping between he pronouns and she pronouns, which is okay, but I keep getting confused. Because this says the conductor was peering over his shoulder. She touched a point on the map far to the south along the lake shore. Whose shoulder? Gil? I guess it was Gil. We're headed there anyway, aren't we? It's supposed to be outside the Sovereign City. The conductor was peering over his shoulder. She touched a point on the map far to the south along the lake shore. What do we know about it? The tuba asked. Do people still live there? I have no idea. It could be a trap, the tuba murmured. The girl could be leading us there. I know, the conductor said. Oh my gosh, stop! $15! Stop! I'm gonna be okay. Thank you guys, though. That's so sweet. Thank you, Joe. Big wee wee. Let me hydrate. Hydrate to celebrate. Thank you so much. I can go get some tea after this. What to do with Eleanor? They knew they risked accusations of kidnapping, and they had long adhered to a strict policy of non-intervention in the politics of the towns through which they passed. But no one could imagine delivering a child bride back to the prophet. Had a grave marker with her name on it already been driven into the earth? Would a grave be dug if she returned? Nothing for it but to take the girl and press on into the unknown south, farther down the eastern shore of Lake Michigan than they'd ever been. They tried to engage Eleanor in conversation over dinner. She'd settled into a wary stillness, the watchfulness of orphans. She rode in the back of the first caravan so that she'd at least be momentarily out of sight if anyone approached by the symphony from the east, or from the rear. She was polite and unsmiling. Oh, that one was Connor. I'm sorry, I was reading your messages in between. That one was Connor. Shout out to Connor. That's so sweet. Thank you. I love it. I love it. Connor, I don't recognize your name. Are you a lurker? A very generous lurker. We love it. What do you know about the Museum of Civilization? They asked. Not very much, she said. I just heard people talk about it sometimes. So, Charlie and Jeremy had heard about it from traders? Also, the prophet's from there, she said. Does he have family there? I don't know. Tell us about the prophet, the conductor said. He'd come to St. Deborah by the water not long after the symphony had left Charlie and Jeremy there, the head of a sect of religious wanderers. The sect had moved into the Walmart at first, a communal encampment in what had once been the lawn and garden department. They told the townspeople they'd come in peace. A few people were uneasy about them, this new population with vague stories about travel in the South, in the territory once known as Virginia and beyond. Rumors held that the South was exceptionally dangerous, bristling with guns and what might they have done to survive down there. But the new arrivals were friendly and self-sufficient. They shared their meat when they hunted. They helped with chores and seemed harmless. There were 19 of them, and they mostly kept to themselves. Some time passed before the townspeople realized that the tall man with blonde hair, who seemed to be their leader, was known only as the Prophet and had 3 wives. "I am a messenger," he said, when introduced to people. No one knew his real name. He said he was guided by visions and signs. He said he had prophetic dreams. His followers said he was from a place called the Museum of Civilization, that he'd taken the road in childhood to spread his message of life. They had a story about setting out in the early morning and then stopping for the day only a few hours later, because the Prophet had seen 3 ravens flying low over the road ahead. No one else had seen the ravens, but the Prophet was insistent. The next morning they came upon a collapsed bridge and a riverside funeral, women singing, voices rising over the white shrouds. 3 men had died when the bridge fell into the river. "Don't you see?" the Prophet's followers said. "If not for his vision, that would have been us." When the winter fever struck St. Deborah by the water, when the mayor died, the Prophet added the mayor's wife to his collection. Whoa, hold up. When the winter fever struck St. Deborah by the water, the mayor died and the Prophet took his wife and then moved with his followers into the gas station in the center of town. No one had quite realized how much weaponry they had. Their stories about travel in the South began to fall into place. Within a week, it became obvious that the town was his. Eleanor didn't know why the Prophet's dog was named Luli. I check in once in a while. I like your design. I hope you feel better. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Big Wee Joe with the 69. And welcome, John. You guys are being very generous today. Thank you. I feel bad. I didn't mean for you guys to feel like you needed to send me money. I'm sorry. But thank you. Thank you so much. That'll get me through until I get my first paycheck. I'm really scared. I'm really scared I'm gonna be fired tomorrow, but I don't know why I'm scared, because I don't really care. Like, I mean, I do care because then I won't have a job, but I don't care because I don't really like this job. You know what I mean? Like, part of me is kind of hoping they just fire me so I can be done. I don't know. I'm so anxious about it. I'll keep you updated, though. Okay, let's see. We're on chapter 20 now. I am going to... Oh, Manager Kun, you missed that part of the stream, didn't you? Sorry, my nose. I haven't gotten to meet my boss yet. And I've been trying to contact her for the past few days because I never was given a chance to put in my availability for my first few weeks of working. And then I got sick, so today I called off of work based on the instructions a coworker gave me because no boss has told me how to actually do anything yet. And I finally got a hold of my boss today, and she refused to give me an answer about my day off request, and she seems angry that I called off today. So I don't know, I feel like I made a very bad first impression, but I just did what I was told. I don't know. Let's get you some monetization so we can member and super you. I literally, wait, let's check. It's probably gone up already. I'm so close to monetization. Excuse me. Excuse me. Yes, we literally... Okay, it didn't go up yet, but we still need only 10 hours. 10 watch hours. You did what you were told and she didn't get back to you first? I know, I literally have not, I didn't get to meet any of my bosses until the last day I worked, and that boss had this entire week off. I'm just stressed. And they can't even give me the hours I want, and I just don't know. Can't blame yourself for being sick. I'm not. I know if she's angry at me, it's irrational. But I'm still scared. Not because I don't care about the job enough to really care if she's mad at me. And I haven't even met her yet. I know if she's mad at me, it's irrational. But just the thought of knowing that I am gonna have to have that confrontation, I'm so scared. I don't wanna. Tell them to watch your stream. They'll see that I was actually sick. I kind of like, you know what's so weird is after COVID times, you'd think that people would be more understanding when you're sick. Like, when I took my temperature last night at like midnight and saw that I still had a fever and I was supposed to go into work at 8 a.m., I was like, hell no. I'm gonna get people sick, and all the customers are gonna hear me coughing like this, and no one's gonna want to be around me anyway, so I'm just gonna call off. But people still get angry. I'm doing it for the greater good. Anyway, I should be talking about monetization. We literally could hit it after the stream, possibly. I don't know how long it takes to update. It might take a while to collect all the views from this stream to add it in there. It all depends on your country, but at the end of the day, you did the right thing. Thank you. Okay. Chapter 20, y'all. We're gonna go for a little while longer. My nose is, my nose is very stuffed. And I keep having to clear my throat. We'll definitely sub when available. I gotta start coming up with plans for membership perks. Yeah, I'm just so excited. Maybe we'll do a subathon or I guess a memberthon to celebrate. Okay, chapter 20. Two days out of St. Deborah by the water, the symphony came upon a burnout resort town. A fire had swept through some years ago, and now the town was a meadow with black ruins standing. A sea of pink flowers had risen between the shards of buildings. The charred shells of hotels stood alongside the lakeshore, and a brick clock tower was still standing a few blocks ahead. The clock stopped forever at 8:15. You'll get all those rich guys gifting? What? Someone find me the rich guys. Someone find me the VTuber sugar daddies. I need me one of those. The symphony walked armed. I don't know if I can read anymore because as I'm talking I can't breathe through my nose. Okay, I keep having to stop and breathe. The symphony walked armed and on full alert, Olivia and Eleanor in the back of the lead caravan for safety, but they saw no signs of human life, only deer grazing on overgrown boulevards and rabbits burrowing in ashy shadows, seagulls watching from lampposts. The symphony shot 2 deer for dinner later, pried the arrows from their ribs and strung them over the hoods of the first 2 caravans. The lakeshore road was a complicated patchwork of broken pavement and grass. On the far side of town they reached the limits of the fire, a place where the trees stood taller and the grasses and wildflowers changed. Just beyond the fire line they found an old baseball field, where they stopped to let the horses graze. Half-collapsed bleachers slumped into tall grass. 3 banks of floodlights had stood over this field, but 2 had fallen. Kirsten knelt to touch the thick glass of a massive lamp, trying to imagine the electricity that it had conducted, the light pouring down. A cricket landed on her hand and sprang away. You couldn't even look directly at them, Jackson said. He hadn't liked baseball much, but had gone a few times as a child anyway, sitting dutifully in the stands with his father. "You gonna stand there all day?" Saeed asked, and Kirsten glared at him but returned to work. They were cutting grass for the horses, to carry with them in case there was a place farther down the road where there was nothing for the animals to eat. Eleanor sat by herself in the shade of the first caravan, humming tunelessly, braiding and unbraiding pieces of grass. She'd spoken very little since they'd found her. The scouts reported a school just beyond the trees at the edge of the field. "Take a couple of the others and check the school for instruments," the conductor told Kirsten in August. They set out with Jackson and the Viola. It was a degree or 2 cooler in the shade of the forest, the ground soft with pine needles underfoot. "I'm glad to get out of that field," Viola said. She had a different name when she was younger, but had taken on the name of her instrument after the collapse. She sniffed quietly. She was allergic to grass. The forest had crept up to the edges of the school parking lot and sent an advance party. What? The forest had sent an advance party out toward the building, small trees growing through cracks in the pavement. There were a few cars parked on flat tires. Hopefully we're going to help. A hugathon! Hugathon! That's a great name for it. Hope you feel better. Definitely enjoy these chill reading streams. Thank you! I wasn't sure if I should do it today because of my voice, but I want to make progress in the book, and I know you guys like these. Words are valued more than money. Respect. Not everyone has means, but the intentions are pure. Exactly. Honestly, the most special thing to me is seeing like the regulars in the chat. Just seeing the same people come by and hang out with me is so special, and it makes me happy. And hopefully, one day we'll have a lot of people coming to hang out. Yes, yes. Yes, 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 yes. I'm bedtime, but here's a sick story. Mad Libs vibes. Okay. "Let's watch for a moment," August said, and they stood for a while at the edge of the woods. The saplings in the parking lot were stirred by a breeze, but otherwise nothing moved in the landscape except birds and the shimmer of heat waves. The school was dark and still. Kirsten brushed sweat off of her forehead with the back of her hand. "I don't think anyone's here," Jackson said finally. "The place looks desolate." "I don't know," Viola muttered. "Schools give me the creeps." "You volunteered," Kirsten said. "Only because I hate cutting grass." They skirted the building first, looking in windows, and saw only ruined classrooms with graffiti on the walls. The back door gaped open into a gymnasium. Sunlight poured through a hole in the ceiling, a few weeds growing in the debris where light touched the floor. This place had been used as a shelter, or possibly a field hospital. A jumble of cots had been piled in a corner of the room. Later, someone had built a fire under the hole in the ceiling, old ashes mixed with animal bones. Easy to read the broad outlines of the room's history, the shelter that had later become a place where people cooked meals, but as always, all of the details were missing. How many people had stayed here? Who were they? Where'd they gone? On the opposite side of the gym, a set of doors opened into a corridor lined with classrooms, sunlight spilling across the floor from the broken-down front door at the end. This had been a small school, 6 classrooms, the floor strewn with broken glass, unidentifiable garbage, the remains of binders and textbooks. They picked their way between rooms, searching, but there was only wreckage and disarray. Layers of graffiti, unreadable names, and puffy, dripping letters across blackboards. Old messages. Jasmine L., if you see this, go to my dad's lake house, Ben. Overturned desks. A fire had darkened a corner of the classroom before someone had put it out, or it died out on its own. The band room was immediately identifiable as such by the heap of twisted music stands on the floor. The sheet music was gone, perhaps used to start the cooking fire in the gymnasium, and there were no instruments. But Viola found a half a jar of rosin in a closet, and Kirsten found a mouthpiece for a flute buried under trash. Words spray painting on the north wall. The end is here. Creepy as hell, Viola said. Jackson appeared in the doorway. There's a skeleton in the men's room. August frowned. How old? Old. Bullet hole in the skull. Why would you look in the bathroom? I was hoping for soap. August nodded and disappeared down the hall. What's he doing? Viola asked. He likes to say a prayer over the dead. Kirsten was crouched on the floor, poking through the debris with the broken ruler. Help me check the lockers before we go. But every student locker had been emptied, doors hanging askew. Kirsten picked up a couple of mildewed? I've never heard that word before. Mildewed? Mildewed! It says mildewed. I never have heard that as, like... Would that be considered a adjective? Or a verb? They've been mildewed? Kirsten picked up a couple of mildewed binders to study the stickers and the Sharpie incantations. Lady Gaga is the bomb, Eva plus Jason forever, I heart Chris, etc. And on a cooler day, she might have spent more time here, interested as always in any clues she could find about the lost world. But the air was foul and still, the heat unendurable, and when August emerged from the men's room, it was relief to walk out into the sunlight, the breeze, the chatter of crickets. Christ, Jackson said. I don't know how you can stand going into these places. Well, we don't go into public bathrooms for starters, August said. I just wanted some soap. Yeah, but it's a dumb move. Someone always got executed in the bathroom. Yeah, like I said, I don't know how you stand it. We stand it because we were younger than you when everything ended, Kirsten thought, but not young enough to remember nothing at all. Because there isn't much time left, because all the roofs are collapsing now and soon none of the old buildings will be safe. Because we're always looking for the former world before all traces of the former world are gone. But it seemed like too much to explain all this, so she shrugged instead of answering him. The symphony was resting under the trees by the side of the road. Most of them were napping. Eleanor was showing Olivia how to make a daisy chain. The clarinet was moving languidly through a series of yoga poses while the conductor and Jill studied a map. A mouthpiece, the first flute said when August revealed their discoveries, and August was the was the person in the symphony who irritated her the most, but she actually clapped her hands and threw her arms around his neck. What was in the school? Alexander asked, when the horses were harnessed and the symphony had set out again. She wanted very much to go into buildings with Kirsten and August, but Kirsten never let her join them. Nothing worth mentioning, Kirsten said, carefully, not thinking about the skeleton in the men's room, her eyes on the road. Just that flute piece and a lot of debris. Dun dun dun! Oh, Jet, you just got back from vacation. Where did you go? That's fun. That's very fun. I don't think someone can be mildewing. I know. Oh, it's an adverb. You're right. You're right. You're right. Oh, no, not an adverb. A past tense verb, I believe. Anyway, I know what mildew is, but I've never heard it used that way. Oh, the next chapter is just one page. I say let's get through chapter 23. We'll read 3 more chapters. All right, chapter 21. Oh, it's more of the interview. God damn it. Francois Diallo. Now, I believe you were very young when the Georgia flu came, when the collapse happened. Kirsten. I was 8. Diallo. Forgive me, this is a fascination of mine when I speak with people who were children back then, at the time of the collapse. And I'm not sure how to phrase this, but I want to know what you think about when you consider how the world's changed in your lifetime. And then Kirsten remains silent. Diallo says, or to phrase it differently, Kirsten says, I understood the question. I prefer not to answer. Diallo. Okay. Alright, I'm curious about your tattoo. Kirsten. The text on my arm? Survival is insufficient? Diallo. No, the other one. The 2 black knives on your right wrist. Kirsten. You know what tattoos like this mean. Diallo. Perhaps you could just tell me. Kirsten. I won't talk about it, Francois, and you know better than to ask. Ooh, I want to know what the tattoo means so bad, so bad. I got back from having my first canal house? What does that mean? I bruised my toe badly. What? Did you hurt your toe in a canal? Okay, chapter 22. When Kirsten thought of the ways the world had changed in her lifetime, her thoughts always eventually circled back to Alexandra. Alexandra knew how to shoot, but the world was softening. There was a fair chance, Kirsten thought, that Alexandra would live out her life without killing anyone. She was a younger 15-year-old than Kirsten had ever been. Now Alexandra walked quietly, sullen because she hadn't been allowed to join the expedition to the school. The symphony walked through the end of the day, clouds gathering and the air pressing down from above, rivulets of sweat running down Kirsten's back. The sky low and dark by late afternoon. They were moving through a rural area, no driveways. Rusted-out cars here and there along the road, abandoned where they'd run out of gas. The caravans weaving carefully around them. Flashes of lightning and thunder, at first distant and then close. They waited out the rainstorm in the trees by the side of the road at twilight, pitched their tents on the wet ground when it was over. I dreamt last night I saw an airplane, Dieter whispered. They were lying a few feet apart in the dark of his tent. They'd only ever been friends. In a hazy way, Kirsten thought of him as family. But her 30-year-old tent had finally fallen apart a year ago, and she hadn't yet managed to find a new one. For obvious reasons, she was no longer sharing a tent with Saeed, so Dieter, who had one of the largest tents in the symphony, had been hosting her. Kirsten heard soft voices outside, the tuba and the first violin on watch. The restless movements of the horses penned between the 3 caravans for safety. I haven't thought of an airplane in so long. That's because you were so young. A slight edge to his voice. You don't remember anything. I do remember things. Of course I do. I was 8. Dieter had been 20 years old when the world ended. The main difference between Dieter and Kirsten was that Dieter remembered everything. She listened to him breathe. I used to watch for it, he said. I used to think about the countries on the other side of the ocean, wonder if any of them had somehow been spared. If I ever saw an airplane, that meant that somewhere planes still took off. For a whole decade after the pandemic, I kept looking at the sky. Was it a good dream? In the dream, I was so happy, he whispered. I looked up and there it was. The plane had finally come. There was still a civilization somewhere. I fell to my knees. I started weeping and laughing, and then I woke up. There was a voice outside then, someone saying their names. Second watch, Dieter whispered. We're up. The first watch was going to sleep. They had nothing to report. Just goddamn trees and owls, the tuba muttered. The second watch agreed on the usual arrangement. Dieter and Saeed would scout the road, a half a mile between them. Kirsten and August would keep watch at the camp. The fourth guitar and the oboe would scout a half mile ahead. The scouts set off in their separate directions, and Kirsten was alone with August. They circled the camp perimeter and then stood on the road, listening and watching for movement. Clouds breaking apart to reveal the stars overhead. The brief flare of a meteor, or perhaps a falling satellite. Is this what airplanes would have looked like at night? Just streaks of light across the sky? Kirsten knew they'd flown at hundreds of miles per hour, inconceivable speeds, but she wasn't sure what hundreds of miles per hour would look like. The forest was filled with small noises, rainwater dripping from the trees, the movements of animals, a light breeze. She didn't remember what airplanes had looked like in flight, but she did remember being inside one. The memory was sharper than most of her other memories from the time before, which she thought must mean that this had been very close to the end. She would have been 7 or 8 years old, and she'd gone up to New York City with her mother, though she didn't remember why. She remembered flying back to Toronto at night. Her mother drinking a glass of something with ice cubes that clinked and caught the light. She remembered the drink, but not her mother's face. She'd pressed her forehead to the window and saw clusters and pinpoints of light in the darkness, scattered constellations, linked by roads or alone in the darkness. The beauty of it, the loneliness, the thought of all those people living out their lives, each porch light marking another house, another family. Here on this road in the forest 2 decades later, clouds shifted to reveal the moon, and August glanced at her in the sudden light. Let me have some water. Oh, I see. A canal house overlooking some part of an ocean. I've never heard of a canal house. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's an ocean thing. I've only ever seen the ocean once, and it was just the Hudson River. For the most part. Okay. Hair on the back of my neck standing up, he murmured. You think we're alone out here? I haven't heard anything. They made another slow circle of the camp. Barely audible voices from inside 1 or 2 of the tents, the sighs and soft movements of horses. They listened and watched, but the road was still. These are the times when I want to stop, August whispered. You ever think about stopping? You mean not traveling anymore? You ever think about it? There's gotta be a steadier life than this. Sure, but in what other life would I get to perform Shakespeare? There was a sound just then, a disturbance passing over the surface of the night as quickly as a stone dropped in water. A cry, cut off abruptly? Had someone called out? If she'd been alone, Kirsten might have thought she'd imagined it, but August nodded when she looked at him. The sound had come from somewhere far down the road, in the direction from which they'd come. They were still, straining to hear, but heard nothing. We have to raise the third watch. Kirsten drew her 2 best knives from her belt. Is this gonna be the knife story? August disappeared among the tents. Oh no, this is after she has the tattoos. Never mind. She heard his muffled voice. I don't know, a sound. Maybe a voice down the road. I needed to take our places so we can go check it out. And 2 shadows emerged to replace them, yawning and unsteady on their feet. August and Kirsten set off as quickly and quietly as possible in the direction of the sound. The forest was a dark mass on either side, alive and filled with indecipherable rustlings, shadows like ink against the glare of moonlight. An owl flew low across the road ahead. A moment later, there was a distant beating of a small wings. Birds stirred up from their sleep, black specks rising and wheeling against the stars. Something disturbed them, Kirsten said quietly, her mouth close to August's ear. The owl? His voice as soft as hers. I thought the owl was flying at a different angle. The birds were more to the north. Let's wait. They waited in the shadows at the side of the road, trying to breathe quietly, trying to look everywhere at once. The claustrophobia of the forest. The first few trees visible before her, monochrome contrasts of a black shadow and white moonlight, and beyond that an entire continent, wilderness uninterrupted from ocean to ocean, with so few people left between the shores. Kirsten and August watched the road and the forest, but if anything was watching them back, it wasn't apparent. Let's walk farther, August whispered. They resumed their cautious progress down the road, Kirsten gripping her knives so tightly that her heartbeat throbbed in the palms of her hands. They walked far beyond the point where the scouts should have been, 2 miles, 3, looking for signs. At first light, they returned the way they had come, speechless in a world of riotous birdsong. There was no trace of the scouts, nothing at the edge of the forest, no footprints, no signs of large animals, no obviously broken branches or blood. It was as though Theodore and Saeed had been plucked from the face of the earth. I didn't realize that. Oh no. I didn't realize that 2 other people had gone missing. Was that the point? Shit. Her ex and the guy she's been sleeping in the same tent with are both missing. Interesting. Okay, chapter 23. This will be the last chapter for tonight. I'm gonna hydrate one last time. I have to pee, but we can get through this chapter. I feel like this will be a good chapter to end on because we have some action here. I just don't understand, the tuba said mid-morning, after several hours of searching for Saeed and Dieter. No one understood. No one responded. The disappearances were incomprehensible. They could find no trace. The symphony searched in teams of 4, grimly, methodically, but the forest was dense and choked with underbrush. They could have passed within feet of Dieter and Saeed and not know it. In those first hours, there were moments when Kirsten caught herself thinking that there must have simply been some misunderstanding, that Dieter and Saeed must have somehow walked by them in the dark, somehow gone the wrong way down the road, that they'd reappear with apologies at any moment, but scouts had gone back and forth on the road for miles. No, I'm not gonna go pee. Again and again, Kirsten stopped still in the forest, listening. Was someone watching her? Just now had someone stepped on a branch? But the only sounds were of the other search teams, and everyone felt watched. They met in the forest and on the road at intervals, looked at one another and said nothing. The slow passage of the sun across the sky, the air over the road unsteady with heat waves. When the night began to fall, they gathered by the lead caravan, which had once... My alarm's gonna go off in a few minutes. I apologize in advance. When night began to fall, they gathered by the lead caravan, which had once been an extended bed Ford pickup truck, because survival is insufficient. Words painted on the canopy in answer to the question that had dodged the symphony since they'd set out on the road. The words were very white in the rising evening. Kirsten stood by Dieter's favorite horse, Bernstein, and pressed her head flat against his side. He stared at her with an enormous dark eye. "We've traveled so far together," the conductor said. "There are certain qualities of light that blur the years." Sometimes when Kirsten and August were on watch together at dawn, she would glance at him as the sun rose, and for a fleeting instant she could see what he'd looked like as a boy. Here on this road, the conductor looked much older than she had an hour earlier. She ran a hand through her short gray hair. "There have been 4 times," she said, "in all these years, when symphony members have become separated from the symphony, and in every single instance they've followed the separation protocol and we've been reunited at the destination. Alexandra? Yes? Will you state the separation protocol, please?" It had been drilled into all of them. We never travel without a destination," Alexandra said. If you're ever separated from the symphony on the road, you make your way to the destination and wait. And what is the current destination? The Museum of Civilization in the Severn City Airport. Yes. The conductor was quiet, looking at them. The forest was in shadow now, but there was still some light in the corridor of sky above the road, the last pink of sunset streaking in the clouds. "I've been on the road for 15 years, she said, "and Saeed's been with me for 12, Dieter for even longer." I need some water. Sorry. "He was with me in the beginning," Gil said. "We walked out of Chicago together." "I leave neither of them willingly." The conductor's eyes were shining. "But I won't risk the rest of you by staying here a day longer." That night they kept a double watch, teams of 4 instead of 2, and set out before dawn the following morning. The air was damp between the walls of the forest, the clouds marbled overhead, a scent of pine in the air. Kirsten walked by the first caravan. Oh, there's my alarm. Sorry. I apologize. The air was damp between the walls of the forest, the clouds marbled overhead, a scent of pine in the air. Kirsten walked by the first caravan, trying to think of nothing, a sense of being caught in a terrible dream. They stopped at the end of afternoon. The fevered summers of this century, this impossible heat, the lake glittered through the trees. This had been one of those places that wasn't quite suburbia, but wasn't quite not, an in-between district where the houses stood on wooded lots. They were within 3 days of the airport now. Kirsten sat on a log with her head in her hands, thinking, Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? And no one bothered her until August came to sit nearby. I'm sorry, he said. I think they were taken, she said without raising her head, and I can't stop thinking about what the prophet was saying in St. Deborah, that thing about the light. I don't think I heard it. I was packing up. They call themselves the light. What about it? If you are the light, she said, then your enemies are darkness, right? I suppose. But if you are the light, if your enemies are darkness, then there's nothing that you cannot justify. There's nothing you can't survive because there's nothing that you will not do. He sighed. We can only remain hopeful, he said. We have to assume that the situation will become more clear. But 4 teams set out in search for dinner, and only 3.5 returned. What the hell? So they lost 6 more people? I turned and she was gone, Jackson said of Sydney, the clarinet. He'd returned to the camp alone and shaken. They'd found a stream, Jackson said, about a 1/4 mile down the road in the direction from which they'd come. He'd knelt on the bank to fill the water container, and when he looked up, she'd vanished. Had she fallen in? No, he said. He would have heard a splash, and he was downstream, so she would have passed him. It was a small stream, and the banks weren't steep. There was just the woods all around him, a sense of being watched. He called her name, but she was nowhere. He noticed then that the bird song had stopped. The woods had gone still. No one spoke for a moment when he'd finished telling the story. The symphony gathered close around him. Where's Olivia? Lynn asked suddenly. Olivia was in the back of the first caravan playing with a rag doll. I want you in my sight, Lynn whispered. Not just within sight, within reach. Do you understand? She was close with Theodore, the first oboe said. This was true, and they were all silent, thinking of the clarinet and searching their memories for clues. Had she seemed like herself lately? None of them were sure. What did it mean to seem like yourself in the course of such unspeakable days? How was anyone supposed to seem? Are we being hunted? Alexandra asked. It seemed plausible. Kirsten looked over her shoulder into the shadows of the trees. A search party was organized, but the light was gone. Lighting a fire seemed too dangerous, so they ate dinner from the preserved food stores, rabbit jerky and dried apples, and settled in for an uneasy night. In the morning they delayed for 5 hours, searching, but they couldn't find her. They set off into another searing day. Is it logical that they could have all been taken? August was walking beside Kirsten. Theodore, Saeed, the clarinet? How could anyone overpower them so silently? There was a lump in her throat. It was difficult to speak. Maybe they just left. Abandon us? Yes. Why would they? I don't know. 6 little ducks went out one day, over the hill and far away. I think I misread that though, because they said only 2.5 of 3 search parties came back, and earlier they said that they increased the groups to 4 people instead of 2, but it sounds like only 1 other person went missing, so we're at 3 total. Later in the day, someone thought to search the clarinet's belongings and found the note, the beginning of a letter. Dear friends, I find myself immeasurably weary, and I've gone to rest in the forest. It ended there. The date just suggested that either it had been written 11 months earlier, or the clarinet didn't know what year or month it was, one or the other. Neither scenario was unlikely. This was an era when exact dates were seldom relevant, and keeping track required a degree of dedication. The note had been folded and refolded several times, soft along the creases. It seems more theoretical than anything, the first cello said. Like she wrote it a year ago and then changed her mind. It doesn't prove anything. That's assuming she wrote it a year ago, said Lynn. She could have written it last week. I think it shows suicidal intent. Where were we a year ago? Does anyone remember? Mackinac City, August said. New Petoskey, East Jordan, all those little places down the coast on the way to New Sarnia. I don't remember her seeming different a year ago, Lynn said. Was she sad? No one was sure. They all felt they should have been paying more attention. Still, the scouts reported no one behind or ahead of them on the road. Impossible not to imagine that they were being watched from the forest. What was the symphony without Dieter and the clarinet and Saeed? Kirsten had thought of Dieter as a sort of older brother, she realized, perhaps a cousin, a fixture in her life and in the life of the symphony. It seemed in some abstract way impossible that the symphony continued without him. She'd never been close with the clarinet, but the clarinet was conspicuous in her absence. She only spoke with Saeed to argue with him now, but the thought of him having to come to harm was sheer agony. Her breath was shallow in her chest, and the tears were silent and constant. Late in the day, she found a folded piece of paper in her pocket. She recognized August's handwriting. Is August gonna go missing too? This is what he wrote. A fragment for my friend. If your soul left this earth, I would follow and find you. Silent, my starship, suspended in night. She'd never seen his poetry before and was impossibly moved by it. Thank you, she said when she saw him next. He nodded. Okay, let me blow my nose real quick because it's gonna drip. It's gonna drip. Excuse me, and I'll do a big old stretch too. Thank you, Eric. Ugh. Oh, I'm tired and I'm scared to go to work in the morning. It'll be okay. The land became wilder, the houses subsiding. They had to stop 3 times to clear fallen trees. They used 2-handed saws, working as quickly as possible, with sweat soaking through their clothes. Scouts posted here and there, watching the road and the forest, jumping and aiming their weapons at small sounds. Kirsten and August walked out ahead over the conductor's objections. A half-mile behind the stalled caravans, they came upon a rolling plain. A golf course, August said. You know what that means. They'd found 2 full bottles of scotch and a can of miraculously still edible cocktail olives in a golf course clubhouse once, and August had been trying to replicate the experience ever since. The clubhouse was at the end of a long driveway, obscured behind a bank of trees. It was burnt out, the roof draped like fabric from the 3 remaining walls. Golf carts were toppled over on their sides in the grass. The sky was darkening now, and it was hard to see much of the clubhouse interior in the pre-storm light, just glints of shattered glass where the windows had been. Too dangerous to go in with the roof half fallen. On the far side they found a small man-made lake with a rotted pier, a flicker of movement under the surface. They walked back to the caravans for the fishing equipment. The 1st and 3rd cellos were sawing at the last fallen tree. Back at the golf course pond, there were so many fish that it was possible to catch them with the net alone, scooping them up from the overcrowded water. The fish were small brownish things, unpleasant to the touch. Thunder in the distance, and then a short time later the first drops of rain. August, who carried his instrument at all times, wrapped his violin case in a plastic sheet he kept in his bag. They worked through the downpour, Kirsten dragging the net through the water, August gutting and cleaning. He knew she couldn't stand to gut fish, something she'd seen on the road that first year out of Toronto, a fleeting impression of some vision that she couldn't exactly remember, but it made her ill when she tried to consider it, and he'd always been kind about it. She could hardly see him through the rain. For a moment it was possible to forget that 3 people were missing. When the storm at last subsided, they filled the net with fish and carried it back along the driveway. Steam was rising from the road. They found the place where the fallen trees had been cut and pulled off the road, but the symphony had departed. No! What? They must have passed by on the road while we were fishing, August said. It was the only reasonable conclusion. They confirmed the route with the conductor before they returned to the golf course with the fishing net. The pond had been far enough off the road that they wouldn't have seen the symphony, hidden as they were behind the clubhouse, and the sound of the symphony's passing would have been lost in the storm. They moved fast, Kirsten said, but her stomach was clenched, and August was jingling the handful of change in his pocket. It didn't entirely add up. Why would the symphony travel in a downpour unless there was some unexpected emergency? The storm had washed the road clear of tracks, leaves and twigs and swirled patterns over the pavement, and the heat was rising again. The sky had a broken-apart look about it now, patches of blue between the clouds. The fish will go bad in this heat, August said. This was a quandary. Every cell in Kirsten's body ached to follow the symphony, but it was safer to light a fire in daylight, and they'd eaten nothing but a strip or two each of the rabbit jerky that morning. They gathered wood for a fire, but of course everything was wet, and it took a long time to spark even the slightest faint flame. The fire smoked badly, their eyes stinging while they cooked, but at least the smoke replaced the stench of fish from their clothes. They ate as much fish as they could and carried the rest with them in the net. Set off half-sick down the road, past the golf course, past a number of houses that had obviously been ransacked years earlier, ruined furniture strewn about the lawns. After a while, they jettisoned the fish. It was turning in the heat and sped up, walking as quickly as possible, but the symphony was still out of sight, and surely by now there would have been some sign of them. Hoof prints or footprints or wheel marks on the road. They didn't speak. Near twilight, the road crossed under a highway. Kirsten climbed up to the overpass for a vantage point, hoping that the symphony might perhaps be just ahead, but the road curved toward the distant shine of the lake and disappeared behind the trees. The highway was miles of permanent gridlock, small trees growing now between the cars, and thousands of windshields reflecting the sky. There was a skeleton in the driver's seat of the nearest car. They slept under a tree near the overpass, side by side on top of August's plastic sheet. Kirsten slept fitfully, aware of each time she woke of the emptiness of the landscape, the lack of people and animals and caravans around her. Hell is the absence of the people you long for. Damn, bro. That is intense. So this book has about, let's see. Yeah, like 330 pages, and we're on about page 150. So we're almost halfway through the book. But I think that's where we're gonna end it today. I'm sorry, Jose, you chose the worst time to show up. I need to get some rest before I work tomorrow. Let me see if there's anyone we can raid today. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Also, don't forget, you guys, we're like 10 hours away from monetization. So if we all try a little bit, we could get there so fast, like today or tomorrow. Wait, what did I say? Did I say something sus? What did I say? Oh, Rosa! Hi! Wait, stop it. Tell me, Rosa, you better not have just raided me. No, it doesn't seem like it. Oh, damn, I'm catching the end of this. Yeah, I'm sorry, Rosa. I'm sick, so I don't want to read for too long today. It's okay, you don't want me here, so you leave. Stop it, Jose! Rude. I hope you're doing well, Rosa. We should collab soon. Wait, you meant Oh, the book had a good quote. Oh yeah, about hell. That was a good quote. My stream isn't for another hour and change. What the hell? Why are you starting so late? This is why you're up streaming until like 5 a.m., Rosa. 6 a.m. Hell is the absence of people you long for. Yeah, that was the perfect line to end on. Alright, well, actually, let me see who we can raid. I see Mino is live. Yeah, let's send it over to Mieko. Yeah, my sleep schedule is wacky. It always has been, though. You and Nay are like nocturnal. Alright, well, I'm gonna send a raid. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream today. My next stream is it tomorrow or the next day? I'm supposed to stream The Sims in 2 days, but I might do another one tomorrow because I had to cancel yesterday's, but I'll let you guys know. It depends if I get fired tomorrow or not. I might be looking for another job. But anyway, goodbye, my friends. I hope you'll come for the next time. Hopefully I can read for longer and I won't be sick. Alright, goodbye until we meet again. Have a good day tomorrow. Wah wah wah.